Okay, so now let's go over some basics of sequencer and how you can create it and then add stuff to it and animate. So first thing, let's first go to content and find our cinematics folder. So this exemplary has the cinematic folder, but if you don't have it, you can just create it and use it for basically storing your sequences. So let's first create our sequence. There is few ways that you could create it. One way would be to right click in your content browser, go to animation and then click on level sequence. But we are going to use another way, and that is to click the button here and then add level sequence. Now it will ask us to create a sequence and will do few stuff for us. So select the cinematics and click save. So few things happen. First, it created a sequence asset in your level, and you can see some details here. So it asks us which sequence we want to use. Then we have the open level sequence, which will basically open this sequencer, and then some options to how it will be played in the level. So maybe when the level starts, you want this to automatically play, maybe you want it to loop multiple times or infinitely. You have your play rate and stuff like that. So this is kind of how it will be played in this level. For now, we won't do anything with that. So first, let's put something on level that we want to animate. So let's click in content browser on the filters, and let's click on the static mesh. Now let's find something that we could animate. So let's take this briefcase and put it in a level. Now that we have this object, let's go to sequencer, and if we click this track button and go to actor the sequencer, we can add whatever object we have selected in the level. So let's click add. You could also add multiple levels. So let's say that you want these objects to be animated, you will see that it says current selection, which is 2 actors. When the actor is created, you will see this track that you can use to basically animate or modify the asset. Since we added this static mesh, we automatically got these transform options, and they give us some control over the location, rotation, and the scale of the object. Now, if you want to animate this, we'll have to create some keyframes. And if you're not familiar with keyframes, the basic concept is you select some value at a certain point in time. So you have this time, and then you have your points values, and then just interpolate between 2 points. So let's say if I set this draw to let's leave it at 0 and click this button. This is basically to add a new keyframe, and let's put it on 30. That's basically 1 second, and let's put the draw to 50. So what will happen is it'll just go from 0 to 50 in that time. And you can see frames in here which basically correspond to your frame rate, but your frame rate can be anything different from 30, but it won't change the speed of the animation, only give you some more control. So if you hold control and then scroll in and out, you can see the actual keyframes. But if I change this to 60, you'll see I have way better control over each keyframe. So this is good for some high speed with a lot of detail. If you want to rotate or modify something, you can see the animation is still the same speed basically, but you have more control. So it basically depends on what you want to do. The next thing would be keyframing. So it will be kind of bothersome to keyframe everything individually, but you have this option where if you're working with this hierarchy, if you click a keyframe at the top of the hierarchy, you will have everything keyframed. And this way you can way more easily make some huge modifications. So if I want to do something like this, and maybe even scale it a bit, I could do all of those transforms, then click on plus here, and we can see it animates all of them. So that's basics of the animation. Now let's go over some details in here. First is of course to save your sequence. So if you make any changes and not save it, it will all be basically destroyed. Next is to find your sequence in content browser. It will just send you directly there. After that, you have this button to create a camera, and this will be important if you're creating a cinematic scene or cinematic sequence, because you'll have to view the player will have to view the sequence somehow, so you'll use the camera for this. But of course, sequence does not have to be used like this. You could just use it to animate something in your scene. Maybe, let's say, some door needs to be open or closed or something like that, so you could use it for that. But adding the camera gives you this camera cuts tab also, which lets you view your final kind of product of your sequence. Right now we don't have the camera that moves, so this is how it happens. Now if you click on the camera, you can see that there is some more default options that you get, which is, let's say we want focal distance, maybe 500. You get some stuff about the camera, but you're not limited by these options that are given you right away. So you can click on this track and you can add a bunch of other stuff. So let's say actor hidden in game, we can add that. And maybe after some time we want the actor to disappear, so we could do something like this, and then the actor disappears. So that all depends on basically what you want to create. Next thing is for the rendering. So this is after you finish, maybe you want to export some video or an image, you would use this. This director blueprint is a bit advanced, so we won't go over that now. We have some playback options. This is just start and end frames, playback speed, stuff like that. So this is where you change the actual speed of your video. And if you zoom out, you can also change your start and end frames in here. This red and green basically decide that. Now let's just go outside of these camera cuts so we don't preview that. If you click at the top, we have this cinematic viewport. This also lets us, let's find our bag. This also lets us manipulate the sequencer through this viewport instead of directly the sequencer. So in here I can also play the animation, I can skip frames, I can skip to the next keyframe, we can jump to the end. We can also choose where it ends and where the keyframes start. And also we have the looping, so if we enable looping, it will just always loop while we preview it. Those are kind of some basic things there. So that's playback. The next thing that is important would be this automatic keyframing. So this means basically that if, let's say, we move this back a bit lower, and let's say we just rotate and move this back, you can see that these keyframes automatically appeared even though we did not keyframe them directly here. So that's kind of the usefulness of the automatic keyframe. Of course, this can give you some trouble if you enable this and then you kind of forget about it, and then you may be just modifying some stuff in the scene, not realizing that your sequencer is open and you're actually keyframing stuff. So you have to be careful with that. The next thing is snapping. So this is just let me put it like this. So just how much it snaps your timeline slider. Then the next is FPS. So this is basically yeah, as we talked about, where you get more control over your frames if you want something to happen in between. The extreme would be if we set, let's say, 12 frames per second. You can see how, let me actually zoom in, you can see how little control we have. If you want to something subtly happens, we don't have control over it. So 330 is default basically. And the last one is curve editor. And this creates a new window that we can dock. And basically, if you select an object, we can basically get a curve type control over our animation. So let's say we want to animate this part, maybe let's actually add, or let's go to roll. So if, let's say, we want to change this curve, how the curve acts across time between keyframes, we could change this in here. So you can see how we can increase the rotation and get something crazy. So this is for more general control. This is kind of advanced thing. So first you general animate whatever you want in here, and then if you want some really fine tuning control, you can get it in here. You can also change how keys interpolate. So maybe you're creating something more mechanical, you would change it to like linear interpolation. For something else, you would use like this cubic interpolation, which is more smooth, and you have like ease in and ease out and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of the sequencer. And you can animate basically anything from the scene. So I could add this car, I could add any of the other things. And when you add it to a sequence, if you click on an object and go into the details, you can actually see all of the stuff that you can animate. And you can see it by these icons. So you can just add keyframe for any property, or not any property, but for a lot of them. So if you want to, let's say, simulate physics, we can disable that. And here you can see how it shows you what type of animation it can do. So for this visibility, we cannot do anything in between visible or invisible. So it's just true false, which is basically a boolean, while the others are float, so it can be like 0.1, 0.05, stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of the sequencer. And the next we're gonna go into actually animating our scene.